Just like that, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please allow me to welcome you just one more time to a stories written by a current prisoner. Wow, do we have one hell of a guest? I'm sure some of you already know who this individual is. He made national news not that long ago. Mr. Jonathan Watson, live from Kern Valley State Prison. How are you doing, sir?
Good. It's good to talk to you again. I'm glad that you provide this platform for individuals to have an opportunity to speak and tell their stories. I know along the way I've met some people and they've said, hey, you should talk to this Tony guy, or I'm going to do this interview with this Tony guy. And it's funny because a lot of times I listen and I think, you know, what a wasted opportunity that there's a platform available for somebody to perhaps make a difference or to say things that are relevant or affect change. And a lot of times I feel like those guys waste that opportunity. And they spend it talking about tough guy stuff, right? Rather than trying to actually use it as a platform to affect change. So again, I'd like to say thanks for giving us that service.
No, man, the pleasure is all mine, man. I truly find a lot of joy in doing these interviews. And just to make it crystal clear, you know, we're not here to try to promote any type of violence or anything like that. However, on the contrary, we're trying to give you an inside perspective inside the minds of an individual who's currently serving a life sentence and has been convicted of 3 homicides. So here we are, Jonathan. I'm gonna go ahead and let you take over. And can you let us know, before we dive into your life sentences and these recent cases, can you let us know a little about your upbringing? You know, did you ever go through any traumatic experiences as a young child? Did you ever see violence?
Well, that's a California story right there, to tell you the truth. I would be hard pressed in prison to find anyone who is not been exposed at some point, you know, to all of that. And certainly the more urban you go, the more you're going to be at the mercy of your fellow man. So, you know, a lot of the guys, whether or not they had it in their immediate family unit, that's just the nature of city life. And yeah, there's points in my life where I have lived in a city environment, and then I have been moved back out to something a lot more rural. And speaking for myself, I thrive in a rural environment as opposed to being in an urban environment. So yeah, no, there's going to be violence. There's going to be gangs. There's going to be there's a lot going on. And the more naive and aloof you are, the more at the...
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
...of your fellow man you're going to be. So, yeah, there is exposure.
When was the first time that you seen something like this?
You know, my first real good run-in, personally, coming to California from a place like Arizona, for example, where people were really good about being patient with particularly other people's kids, especially whenever a little rugrat like me was underfoot or getting into stuff. I had a lot of hands-on and a lot of people really looking out for my best interest. But coming to California, you're really naive and aloof. So my first probably and best example of one of these run-ins for me might just be that I went out and tried to skateboard around, you know, in an urban environment in Sacramento, and ran into the various gang stratas. And I was always curious. That's my nature. I'm a curious human. And so I would want to check out their lowriders, and I would check out their little gang hangouts, and that ended bad. That's not going to end good for a little white dude on a skateboard. So that was my first exposure where I go, oh, wait a minute. These guys, they are mean for mean's sake. they're, without having any reason to treat other human beings in a very malicious manner. They're definitely a presence in California, and it's the school of hard knocks, dude. You're gonna learn. It's just that simple. Yeah.
When was the first time that you hurt someone physically, hit someone, took it to the extreme? And when was the first time you actually done something, and why? What compelled you to do that? And was it easy? Was it hard? Was there regret after?
Yeah. I mean, there was a whole lot of run-ups to that, like I said, in the urban environment. But then I would go on to firebomb a known hangout of, we'll just call them a group of individuals that were causing a whole lot of trouble, particularly for younger people and dudes like me. And I just firebombed them, to hell with it, right? And so that would start something that would lead eventually to me going to California Youth Authority. And once you're in the Youth Authority, I mean, it's all hands on deck, dude. You either it's sink or swim. So you're dropped in the tank of sharks, and you're going to learn to punch a shark in the nose, or you're going to get eaten. So, yeah, California Youth Authority for me that's a demarcation line that there's no going back from that one. That one's going to install software into your operating system. You're going to learn to operate in a certain way that you're never going to be able to get that out of your programming again. And it's going to manifest whenever you get out of California Youth Authority. People are going to mistakenly do things, and you could call that PTSD, or you could call it triggers, or you could call it whatever people these days call those things. But they are like fuses that when those fuses pop, it's all bad. It's all bad. And all you could do is try to tell people like, hey, I've been exposed to situations, and I need a little bit of help here. I need you to help me help you, Don't do that around me ever again. Yeah.
Jonathan, I must ask you, did you ever go through anything significant that might have changed you, like impacted you, like maybe broke your heart? Maybe you went through a bad relationship, got your heart broken. Maybe you lost your father. Maybe, something that really affected you mentally, emotionally.
Are you talking about prior to prison?
Yes, sir. Prior to prison.
Yeah. I mean, everybody does, though. That is the human experience. That's part of that's what humans do, is that we adapt and overcome. We face these situations, and we absorb the information, and we try to extrapolate it forward, right? We try to quantify every way that this information is going to reoccur later, and we try to do our best to prevent that. By some people get tough, some people get smart, some people become software engineers, some people become gangbangers. Some people sell drugs. Those are choices, and they're all choices. Everybody is afforded the exact same opportunities in America, whether they admit it or not. Equal opportunity does not mean equal outcome. So the sooner a young human can learn that the avenues that you take moving forward, there's no entitlement. You're not entitled to equal outcome. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because in Dr. Joshua Long, he did a book with Jason Vukovich, and it was called Avenging. Started my journey with Dr. Josh, and it was the same line of questioning that more or less made me an outlier in their book, because every other individual in that book was a victim of pretty much hands-on as a child. And so they, in turn, had become various kinds of hunters that would kill or torture predators or or act out towards sexual predators violently in retaliation. Whereas I was the one guy that was kind of like, no, I see the content of their character. I know who they are, and I can read them. It's best described as like an ethereal web. It is like this web where these nasty humans land on your web and they start to vibrate, and you are appalled and disgusted by their vibration, and they come up on your radar. And for me, I can't ignore them. So I have managed to take one or two off the board, certainly. But that made me an outlier. The lack of hands-on exposure as far as being a victim to one of them was unique for me. So, yeah.
Is it easy to commit violence, Jonathan? And if so, why?
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
So the question that I'm hearing you ask is why handle things with violence? Is that the question?
No. It's is it easy? Is it easy to commit acts of violence? And if so, why? Why is it easy? If in fact it is.
Of course. No, it's sure. No, it is the easiest answer, and it is the quickest answer to get results. But, of course, that doesn't always make it the correct answer. And there's so many variables that you could cite, that, oh, well, I mean, if police agencies aren't going to take care of these people, I will. And you can make all of these excuses, and I do. I have a Rolodex full of excuses that I can cycle through. But, no, sure, I mean, at the end of the day, for certain crimes, there is no rehabilitation. And you eventually come to understand that. And you see that they are being weaponized and used, and you see that they are a pawn in the game for, more importantly, they are a pawn for all of the agents that you don't like that are working against you, that are using them against you, particularly in prison. And you know that if they get out, and frankly, they always do, there's no such thing as real life sentences when it comes to offenders. And I got to warn people, with senators like Scott in Sacramento, this guy is basically a lobbyist for the pedophile community. So as long as you have senators like that in California down there writing laws to normalize all of the madness that is pedophilia, you're going to have to do something about it. I mean, you cannot just let these people keep cycling through. But prison has a short memory. Society has a short.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
I could kill 10 of them, and in 6 months, the other would stop being afraid. they would just go back to their normal program.
Are you able to call back, Jonathan?
I am. Yes, I am.
You know, as I previously stated, everybody out there, Mr. Jonathan Watson is currently serving a life sentence. He has been convicted of 3 different homicides. But before we dive into that, obviously, there's something that led him to prison, and a whole lifestyle behind it. So for the people that don't know, Jonathan, would you be able to enlighten us on what was it that happened, man? How did you find yourself serving a life sentence for murder?
And you start getting angrier and angrier, and as you see the drug dealers, as you see them continue to get away with stuff, it doesn't sit good with you, and you can turn a blind eye. Some people can do it indefinitely, and that is good for them. I'm glad that they have the character to do that. And then other people have just so many exacerbating factors going on, I think, in their life that they just go take care of business. And I found myself in a situation where I did in fact smoke somebody, and without saying a whole bunch of negative stuff about his character, I'm not going to assassinate a dead man's character, but that's what happened. So I found myself in prison for life.
You found yourself in prison for life. Now, fast forward, how many years were you incarcerated up until this point that this incident happened, sir?
Oh, yeah. So the 2020 incident happened whenever I was, 12 years in. That would be about 10, that'd be 12 years in. And I mean, it was pretty widely publicized. You know, Nate Gertrell, I have to give it to Nate, because Nate did an astonishing job covering the story as it happened, as opposed to some other people. Like, people have specifically cited somebody named Wes Watson, for example, who has a site where he tells...
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
I obviously am no relation to Wes Watson, nor have I ever spoken to him, but his information was not correct, for example. So there's been coverage of the story, and some people got it right, specifically because they reached out and they vetted their information, particularly through me, while other people just told the narrative that they thought it was, and they did not get it correct.
Does that upset you when, you might receive news from a friend or from a family member that, hey, you know what, I just seen a video about you, and all their information is wrong, your picture's up there, and they're probably making a few $100 off of it. So how does that make you feel?
It would be nice if they, at a bare minimum, obviously reached out and vetted the information. Secondly, those narratives hurt other people. For example, someone somewhere, I don't know who, started a story that I was hunting sex offenders to retaliate in vengeance for someone who assaulted my sister, which is not accurate. And more to the point, now my sister has to go to work and look her coworkers in the eyes and and explain to them, like, that's untrue. Nobody sexually assaulted me. So that's really bad for everybody. I mean, I would like to think that people would do better by their fellow man than to just trade their fat for sport, because that's really what it is, right? At the end of the day. And it's just more of the same of what we're talking about in California. You're always someone's fodder. Someone's always using your name.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
They're always using your social security number and your name to grip some program that some bloated bureaucratic government entity somewhere thought was a great idea, but then some union, or be it teachers, be it, the CCPOA, the officers union, everybody's figuring out somewhere how to make money off of you. So it is more of the same. And I would like those people to do their best to tell prisoner stories, because that's really important. Whenever, maybe not abolition, but at least a prison reform that is responsible and insightful and not radicalized, just a modest, moderate, constant stride towards prison reform. And whenever people are telling crazy narratives, I mean, that nullifies the entire process.
Jonathan, now this 2020 incident, man, if you kindly will, man, would you be able to explain to us, man, what was it that happened? But obviously leading up to it, weeks prior, months prior, what is your thought process? What is going on in your mind?
Sure.
How did this whole thing play out, sir?
Right. So I would say, in particularly about the 8 years that were the run-up to the situation, I kind of had overexposure to a lot of the toxic conversations that these guys have. As I would go to the hole or as I was in various shoes or whatever, I was stuck in cells where I could hear their conversations and I could not get to them. And I don't know how to explain that to somebody except that someone much smarter than myself once said, hell is other people. And whenever you are stuck in a cell as a captive audience to people who use, reparations as a euphemism for, or have a million euphemisms for child people, and you can't get your hands on these people. I can't describe the level of rage that you start to feel and the malice, that the hardening of the heart that starts to happen. And it don't matter how far left of center you were when you came to prison. I mean, I played in punk bands and had a mohawk and listened to Dead Kennedys. So I'm as good an example as any of someone who, for lack of better words, was red-pilled by the very same idiots who I used to think were at least salvageable or could be rehabilitated. And I don't know if it's the first week that people hear this, or if it's the first month, or if it's 2 years in, or if it's 50 people in, or if at some point or another, you are going to realize the content of the character is consistent. It's ubiquitous and everywhere, and nobody's doing nothing about it. And everybody else seems to be doing 5 life sentences in California except them. So they increasingly became a constant on my radar, and it doesn't surprise me that I eventually ended up with multiple dead. I mean, that shouldn't surprise anybody. Yeah.
You mentioned the term last time, making it rain weirdos.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're everywhere, and it isn't just the inmate population. That's part of the problem, is that when you're there and you're in it. For example, Johnny Walters was a CO that was sentenced on December 6th in 2013 for being a, and that officer was around us. He was talking crap to a lot of people all day.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
Calling other people pedophiles. And lo and behold, the guy ends up having a pool party filming little kids. You end up with a lieutenant from this prison named Jose Valdez, who got caught trying to traffic a kid. You got Ricardo Mancias, who is, he was caught in a sting, a local law enforcement sting, trying to traffic a 13-year-old girl. So you have it in custody too, and that's where it starts to fall apart, right? Once you suspend your disbelief, and you go, oh, okay, all right, now I'm starting to see the whole picture. I have pedophiles all around me. Some are in green, some are in blue.
Are you able to call back Jonathan once more?
All right.
Now, of course, Jonathan, everybody in this world hates people who have hurt children, who have hurt old people, who hurt women. Nobody likes these types of people, whatsoever. Obviously, something must have compelled you to act, to finally snap. I must ask, what was it?
Right.
What was it that finally just made you lose it?
Well, there's a history in the CDCR, whether people choose to believe it or not. The Green Wall is part of this. And there's a history of enforcers, that is, prisoners that operate almost as buccaneers did in the Caribbean, where you more or less are green-lighted on certain prisoners by custody. And then suddenly those prisoners are not green-lighted, and if you fail to get the memo and you strike them, well, now you're a pirate. Now you're no longer a buccaneer. You're a pirate. So a lot of prisoners do this song and dance, and they more or less get free passes along the way to take care of particular kinds of prisoners. And I did that for a long time. And there were some things that started being abused by the custodial apparatus. And a lot of it was the language. A lot of it was the trust. They started violating our trust. They started telling us that people were pedophiles that were not. And it would turn out that the people they wanted us to strike at would in fact just be people that were pushing paperwork, that were trying to affect change, that were so we were striking the people who were operating in our best interest. And it was a very insidious, slippery slope where we had trusted custody up to the point where it wasn't even part of our reckoning that they would lie to us and say somebody was a sex offender when they weren't. That's just no, I couldn't believe that for a second until it happened. And then it happened again. And then once that trust was broken, we no longer operated for them. But it's almost like teaching people warfare, an army, and then when you don't need that army, we do this everywhere we go, right? This is how we built the Taliban. This is what happened in Afghanistan. We take our weapons and we take our know-how and we teach people. So that's kind of what it is like, where the prison body, the humans that make up the collective, have been weaponized and used in that manner. And then all of a sudden we're basically Ronin samurai. We're basically samurai without a master, and we're looking to wet our blades in blood. And we're not going to slow down on the offenders. And so what you do is you find out that suddenly, whenever offenders want to do custody's bidding, whenever the offenders sit in their sweatshops and sew fire suits, well, now custody's suddenly very offended that you get one. Whenever the offender wants to go file paperwork for a captain and type his little memos and be his little bootlick sycophant, well, now all of a sudden they're very offended when you hit that offender. So that's what a lot of us came up against, and that's what I came up against personally. And I did it loud and proud. I didn't hide what I did, and I made sure everybody knew what I was doing. And I kept my foot on the accelerator all the way through the whole incident. And when the smoke cleared, I had dead pets on 2 different tiers. So it's a master class. For me, it was a master class. And that is a testament, again, I say this a lot in my personal journey through the CDCR, is that a lot of us came from jobs and careers that were very social. Whether you are a barber, whether you're a loan officer, whether you did management, it's incredible to me to see people who were working class people that were anything from a bartender to retail management turn into killers. And that's when you start laughing. Every time you see the word rehabilitation, it puts a big smile on your face, because nothing could be further from the truth, right? What happened, the primary moving parts in the story were that I was at a prison where they had more or less targeted me and a few other people because of compliance issues, but also more importantly, because it was, we were taking cells and what you would call putting them in the red, which means we weren't taking cellies, so they weren't able to make twice as much off the cell. We weren't going and working in their sweatshops, which means they weren't making money there. We wouldn't, for me.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
They tried to put me in high school classes 3 different times. And it got to the point where I got my high school transcripts and carried them on me. Like the same way I carry my paperwork to show other prisoners, I literally have to carry my high school transcripts. To this day, I have them in my cell in case they try to, because it's a grift. They're always looking for the grift. They're always looking how to make money. So ironically, a warden named Joe Lizarraga got caught grifting himself and stealing from the inmate welfare fund. He was escorted off of the prison grounds by the FBI. And there's an article, I'm looking at it now, let's see, called Theft, Lies, and Bribes, Forced California's Warden Early Retirement, 11,500 monthly pension. That article is written by Mark Wilson, October 1st of 2020. And so Lizarraga gets arrested by the FBI. So there you go. You're in California now. Now you know you're in California. The warden has been arrested by the FBI for stealing the money that is intended to be used to buy prisoners deodorant, toothpaste. It's called the Inmate Welfare Fund for a reason. And guess what? None of these prisons give any prisoner anywhere deodorant, toothpaste. That stuff doesn't exist in prison. You don't get 3 hots in a cot. You're hungry. You stink. You have nothing that you need. So once again, we're back to the rage because they're telling people as they charge them $80,000 to $100,000 a year to house us that we're getting all this rehabilitation and we must be getting soap. And you would think we get a loofah and body wash for $100,000 a year. But no, they don't even give us deodorant. So there goes Lizarraga stealing from that inmate welfare fund, which we all thought was hilarious. And in the intermittent time, there were people that started getting to play warden. And one of them was a CC2, who I personally had problems with multiple times. Another one was a officer named Cantu, who both of these people had been summarily passed over for warden positions. So now that the warden's gone, it's like kids playing doctor. I mean, they're playing warden and they're making a bunch of willy-nilly decisions. And they targeted my single cell status. What's important about that is that they did not just take my single cell status. They had a previous warning from a mental health professional on the streets who had sent in letters to Gavin Newsom, to the Departmental Review Board. They had sent letters to the CC1, the CC2, to my psychs. Anyways, this letter specifically stated that they wanted a 128G information chrono placed in my file, stating that if they took my single cell, people are going to die. Don't take a single cell. I then also 602'd custody and filed a 602. I have the grievance numbers in the book. And then I filed 602s against the mental health, and I specifically stated once again, just so you know, if you take my single cell, I'm not playing your game. I'm not playing this little shenanigan where you constantly are doing musical chairs on who you put in the cell with me, and we already know who that's going to be. We know who, what, when, where, and why, and it's going to be a dead chomo. That's what it's going to be. And if I kill him in my cell, now you're going to take all my property and you're going to make it all evidence. And this is just a whole nightmare situation that plays out again and again and again in prison. And with life sentences, I'm not going to play it. So they really...
Three-way call alert.
So they didn't just take my single cell status. They pulled out this golden unicorn that I had heard prisoners mention this before, and I thought that it was a myth. I thought that it was a fairy tale. It's called the Big Six Review. And what a Big Six Review does is it goes into your C file, and it basically circumvents the Department Operation Manual, circumvents the Title 15, and it allows them to take like 30, 40, 50 points off of your C file. So they were able to override me all the way down to a level 2, which means now they're going to put me in a dorm. And that's what they did. So during that time, I started writing a manifesto. The manifesto would end up being 18 pages. They would later cut it down to 2.5 that would be the evidence They did not want the other 15 or so pages going into evidence on that because a large part of that had been smart-ass remarks by them on carbon paper. I had written, sent it to them on carbon paper. The form is called a CDCR 22, which no longer has a carbon on it after this. And they would write they would copy, they would write smart-ass remarks, and a CC2 named Costa actually wrote, "Don't talk about it, be about it," which anybody who's been in prison for any amount of time understands that's a turn of phrase that's really common. And it basically says, you're talking shit, but you ain't doing nothing. So it was a very direct invitation to the dance. She basically taunted me and said, "I don't think you're going to kill anybody." And all right, well, buckle up, because I'm about to give you fucking dead bodies everywhere. So, yeah, it's actually printed in 2 different books. What remained of the manifesto, 2.5 pages, and I didn't expect. I'd never seen a level 2. In prison, I had never not been under the gun, as they say. So I had 0 expectations of not getting shot. I mean, I did not think for a second that was going to happen. So I basically said everything that needed saying. I talked about my journey through the CDCR, what got me there, how custody has just pushed and pushed and pushed to the point where I see no other options. And I cited all of the paperwork. I cited the 602 numbers for both 602s. And initially, to tell you the truth, what I had intended to do is I had copies of both of the 602s, which they ghosted out of the evidence. I intended to kill offenders and then put the 602s on the offenders because I wanted to make sure they couldn't ghost it. And I knew that if it was on the dead body and if it had blood on it, that's evidence. They are going to look at that and there's going to be questions.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
If you think about it, like the whole process, it actually it overrides your biological, right? I mean, survival is your biological imperative, and to be self-serving is your biological imperative. So you got to really be at the end of your rope for to be at the point where you're going to throw yourself on the levers and the cogs of the machine, and you're just going to jump on the grenade in order to try and bring attention to the problem. I mean, you can only imagine the state of mind.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
So that's what the manifesto was. As you'll see in a minute, things happened so fast that I didn't actually have time to pull out the documents and put them on the dead body. What finally happened was that I had asked several people to help me correct the situation, and one of them was a corrections counselor. They're called CC1s. I was in his office once I got to the next prison, because when I was at the other prison, it's important to understand that they took my single cell status, but they still would not put somebody in my cell. And that's very important. So they took my single cell status. They left me in a single cell all the way until they put me on a bus to the next prison. And then the next prison is none the wiser. Whenever I get off the bus at the next prison, they don't, and prison is like that. Prison is, they're like nation states. It's like a little archipelago of different nation islands. And one prison is constantly trying to send the next prison its problems. And that's what happened. So I landed at the next prison, and I tried to explain, it was on day 7, that I was pretty much done explaining there. I'm all out of reason now. I gave them 7 days of reasoning. And I go into the fellow's office, the CC1, and I tell him, this is it. This is your last chance. You're going to put me back in cell living, and you're going to have to give me back my single cell status. I cannot continue to live in the environment that you created, and I'm going to kill people. And he laughed. You know, they constantly laugh at me or with me because I used to have a really amiable disposition right up until this point at 2020. This is the time where I probably lost a lot of my humor. But the guy was laughing, and he just, they'd never seen anybody just ghost a couple of dudes, right? So I go back in, and I had previously chased off. In the week of the run-up, I had told several people, just leave, go to suicide watch. I don't care where you go. Get the fuck out of my sight. I better not see you again. So lo and behold, here comes one that I chased off, and he walks up the stairs. He puts his stuff on his bed, and he turns his TV onto PBS Kids, and he puts his hand down the front of his pants, not to mention that obviously would have got multiple people on him, but prisoners do that. That's how prisoners stand very frequently. So he put his hands in his pants, but he looked around and smirked, and I immediately got up, picked up a cane that I may or may not have had ready, and it was very heavy because it was packed full of sand and put out overnight to freeze, and the sand freezes, and it creates a pretty heavy cane. And I beat his skull in until he's already into the tears. It's turning into a pool, quite the pool, and there's chunks of there, and I've now got and so on my boots, and like, okay, all right, yep, we got him. That guy's dead. Not mad at myself for it. I did everything I could. I even went beyond what most people would do to prevent this from happening. So I'm at peace with what I did. And as I'm walking down the stairs, there's a second child trafficker that I know he's a child trafficker. I know there's about 5 of them there, actually. I know who they all are. And he is just standing there bebopping around, listening to music, and he's just living it up, man. It's like he's not even scared of nothing, and everybody else has situational awareness. Everybody else in that dorm heard that guy's skull crack so loud that they thought I was slapping shower shoes on the ground. So they looked up because that's kind of a faux pas in prison to make that kind of noise. And they realized, oh, that was that guy's skull. That was not shower shoes. And that guy, for whatever reason, is just aloof, and he's so comfortable and he's so happy in prison that he is not even aware that people are walking around looking for people to kill. And I walk up to him and I kind of wave in front of his face, and his pupils did the deer in headlights thing. They dilated really quick, which is this whole, fight or flight. And I nodded. I said, oh, yeah, it's time. And I beat him to death, which is exhausting. And then I drug him around by his foot. So that was the moment where it wasn't just homicides. It wasn't just, that was the part where it kind of becomes a clinic and it becomes a teachable moment. And I drug him out for all of his buddies to see. And I told him, I said, I've seen you eating with this guy. I've seen you working on fans with this guy. And I'm pointing the cane at people. And, they know that they were indulging this dude's every whim in every which way. And I don't understand it, because these people claim to be in gangs, for one. If you're in a gang, which that's a whole nother aspect of it, is that the gangs are selling protection to these people. So you are pretty much going to have to walk through a unified front of people to have access to offenders. And you got to call the bluff. They're either going to stop you or they're not. And in this case, they didn't want any. They watched me just beat their protected dude to death. And that was it. There was a third guy that wanted a hat trick. I really wanted to get the third dude, but I have a specific reason why I did not get the third dude.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
I won't go too far down that path, but I knew the optics were bad. If I got the third dude, nobody would care that he was a sex offender. What they would care about was that I was a white man with a bald head, and I knew that. So I pumped the brakes as he tripped over his own feet running from me. And I used it as a moment of levity. I said, all right, see, this is who you guys are. Just remember that. Every time you look in the mirror from this point forward, remember you are the dudes that fell tripping over your own feet to get away from guys like me. We didn't ask to come here. When I first came to prison, they specifically kept us all level 4. If you had life, you could not leave a level 4 yard. And that's what created the mess that they have now, is that we acclimated. You put me on a level 4 yard, you told me I'll never be anything but level 4. So I got with the business. And now all of a sudden, you want me to go back and play nice. It's like having a superbike team that raced in the 750 class, going back down to some sort of 600 super sport class. I mean, you can't change that muscle memory. We race hard, right? And so I use it as a teachable moment. And then I walked into the atrium area, which is where the officers were. And I said, I got bad news for you, to a officer. His name's Boucher. And I like Boucher. Boucher likes me. We have no reason to not like each other. He is, as best I could tell, just a young fella doing a job. I have no malice towards him. And he senses that. And he said, oh, what are you going to do? Are you going to hit me with that cane? He was joking. And I said, man, what do you think this cane would do to somebody, Boucher? And he says, oh, man, that cane. And he goes on to make jokes about how bad he thought the cane might really mess somebody up. And he's not paying attention to the fact that the cane has blood on it. That I have brains on my boots, that I do have a very minute amount of blood splatter on me. He's not reading the situation well yet. He's really young. The guy's young, and he's on a level 2. He's never. And so finally, I tell him, I say, well, I'm going to tell you, I just beat 2 chomos with this cane, and I promise you, one of them's dead. And he laughs again. He says, oh, Watson, you make me laugh. And I said, no, just poke your head around that corner and look in that dorm. It's a bloodbath. And he did. And he says, okay, you got to cuff up. So, yeah, that's what gets us to the point where I go to the hole for a double homicide, which ironically I would find out the CDCR had not had since the 70s. And there was a whole moment of levity during the disposition hearing on what to do with me, where they were going, what do we do? Do we charge him? Do we double the punishment for a double homicide?
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
You take your jokes where you can, right? It's, yeah. So, yeah, first double homicide in the CDCR since the 70s.
Where did they end up housing you exactly? And once you're there, the adrenaline wears down. What is going on in your head? What are you thinking about? What is your thought process?
Yeah, immediately I joked. I did a lot of dad jokes. They brought the bodies by me. I told the first guy, children everywhere are pulling for you, buddy. You'll be okay. And then I made a joke about the second guy. I told the officers, I said, his eyes were so blue that when I smacked, everybody kind of made an uncomfortable laugh. And they put me in, unfortunately, suicide watch, which I understand that it is procedure. But for a guy like me who has to do life in prison, I worry about my C-file and I worry about my jacket. So having a stink on my C-file, which is like a resume, that the first thing cops see is my C-file in the program called Psalms. The first thing a parole board would ever see is my C-file, the first thing right? So it just on and on this goes. People make their minds up about you in a preconceived manner based on that C-file. So I actually begged the clinician who is a trauma specialist. She's like the last level of strata. And bear in mind, these people are really just covering their ass, because what they're trying to do is create an optic that they have been there and been hands-on with you the whole way, and they haven't. They have completely disregarded all of your warnings. But now that it has hit the fan, and now that there's dead bodies everywhere, all of a sudden they're hands-on, and so it's kind of an overcorrection is what it is. They go, okay, put him in suicide watch, and now it looks like he's, nuts or something. I begged them. I said, just not suicide watch. Take me to the hole like a normal human being. That's what I planned on, not suicide watch. But they did. They put suicide watch, and while I suicide watch, that's when the story got traction. That's when people started writing letters, and I didn't get any of them in suicide watch. But when I got out and I was housed in what is now called the ASU, what is formerly just the hole or the shoe, but what is now ASU. After 4 days, it was Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. So after 4 days in suicide watch, I went to ASU and I started getting my first mail. And I go, wow, people like the story. No one is mad at me. Right. Yeah.
When the guards had to recover you and, having to talk to you or interact with you in these next following days, can you notice the fear on them? Can you sense that in people?
No, nobody had fear. I believe the question you asked is whether or not the COs had a vibe of fear about me. No, because my violence up until this point, and still, and barely, it's by the skin of my teeth. Don't get me wrong, because I have had some really bad situations in prison that have got me to where I'm at. But up until this point, I have made it a proxy war, and I have particularly targeted disgusting prisoners. And I usually, when I do it at the point where I know if I don't do something worse somewhere is going to happen. So, for example, if I know that something is coming down the pipeline that's going to result in me going bad on a staff, you might see me strike out at a sex offender that I kept kind of in my pocket that I knew about that other people didn't, for example, because I'm trying to remove myself. It's my last ditch effort when all reason and everything else has failed, because up until this point, and again, I can't stress enough that this may have a timer on it, but for the time being, like I said, I have tried to not let the collateral damage be working class Americans, and if I can get somebody's monster, like I said, it's these people are other people's monsters, and I really realized that once I started getting all the mail. That's when everybody wrote and said, this happened to me and that happened to me. And if I missed writing anybody back, I would like to say that I wrote back, I would say 90% of the people that wrote to me, and I did my best to be a good ear, a good listener. And, some people sent thank you cards. Some people put money on my books, which is amazing, right? And it just, for one moment in my history in prison, it just, everything dissipated. All the tension, all the racial tension, all the class warfare, all of the politics, all of that, right? There's like a 6-month window where it was just awesome. Even in prison, when I would go out to the cages, I don't get yard at that point. I'd go out to the cages, and every group or gang or race, however you want to frame it, they were like, yeah, dude, you're our guy. That was awesome. We know exactly who you are, and that shit was awesome. Yeah, it was good. It was good. And like I said, prison has a short memory, so soon people forgot. And But yeah, that was a good moment. Good moment in prison
Has your
history right
life
there.
changed in any way? Has your mentality changed in any way since this incident? Since this blitzkrieg?
Immensely. That is a stellar question. Yes, that. I love that question, and yes, it has. Where it changed for me is that people like Dr. Joshua Long, for example, they started reaching out to me to talk to, however I could, their students. Dr. Long is a criminologist professor at Lowell University in Massachusetts. And so he provided me the platform to speak to his criminology students who are tomorrow's wardens, tomorrow's possibly correction officers, law enforcement, and so and I think that this is true of humans in general. I think that the more faith that their fellow man puts in them, the more incumbent it becomes on them to perform at a higher level, to be more accountable to the people that provide to you or that are good to you, if that makes any sense. And so the same could be said of all of the people that sent me money. So now when I have all of these Hispanic people or all of these Black people or whatever, all of these people have sent me money, that really changes my considerations moving forward in the strata of prison. The way prison operates for guys has a lot to do with race. And I don't want to violate the trust and the faith that people have put in me, if that makes sense to you. So Dr. Joshua Long did those books with me, and that has more or less made me at least a prison criminologist for the time being, until better and smarter people. I can't stress enough that there are way better people that should be doing this. But for the time being, I am doing it. And what that means is that I need to behave in a manner that I would behave in if Dr. Josh were standing there judging me, if that makes sense. And I think that does. I think that most people understand what I'm...
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and...
Do you ever replay these incidents in your mind? Like, do you think about these things often? Have you ever replayed this in your dreams?
Yeah, well, I mean, I try to stay moving forward. Bruce Lee, I think it was in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, he said, moving water does not grow stale. And I try to continue to flow and to move forward and to quantify information and to, if and when I can, and I am not the best at this, not have the ego. I try to be a student. I try to be a traveler. I try to be a guest. I try to be a human. I'm a mammal. I'm just a mammal, and I'm going to do mammal stuff. Like, if people hurt me, I'm going to react. But in the moments where I do have peace and quiet, where I can think, I try to consider operational procedures moving forward that are something on a higher frequency than the brute force that got me to the point where I came to prison, and they got me a bunch of, I got a body count, and I, that's there's something better. There's something better to all this, and hopefully, Dr. Josh, myself, people like you with your platform, the various companies.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
That are publishing books. Hopefully, we are laying some kind of groundwork. Hopefully, we are making a pool of information that people can use to build knowledge, to quantify, to extrapolate, to make decisions for a better future. And I know that not talking about it and not doing nothing about it is not my style. I I can't just sit on my hands while something so gross and corrupt as the CDCR exists without at least saying with the best words that I have what my experiences are and what I've seen. So hopefully we've done that, right? And pretty soon some smart, bright people can come along and make a better prison system, if nothing else, right?
Is there any type of regret at all whatsoever?
No, there isn't. And not with the 2020 case. I could name 100 regrets prior to prison, and that's an important point that people really miss during the I'll put it in air quotes again, rehabilitation process, is that until you can acknowledge the fact that just by coming to prison, period, full stop, just by coming to prison, you have failed as a son, you have failed as a father, you have failed as a husband, ex-husband, wife, whatever your gender, you have failed your community, your fellow man, you failed your nation, you have failed colossally. So what do you do? Are you a phoenix? Can you rise from the ashes of that failure?
You know, Jonathan, I wanted to ask you, I was going to ask you this earlier. Have you actually seen something like this actually take place? Have you actually seen someone lose their life inside of prison before this 2020 incident?
I believe the question you just asked is, have I seen people lose their life in prison? And if that is the question, yes, I have seen it multiple times. I have even seen, we have had people that we grew up with who were bona fide killers get killed in prison on prison yards that you would not expect them to die on. And it's interesting. It's a moving board. It's 3D chess, and situational awareness is paramount. And I have not just seen people get killed. I had previously seen offenders get their heads smashed in ways not entirely different than the way I did it. And it's not monkey see, monkey do, because I have a genetic predisposition for things like war hammers and battle axes, probably. I am, if nothing else, a Viking, I'm thinking. But it certainly is something that the more you see it, the more acclimated to it you become, and the more old hat, where it's, like, all right, another dead body, let's watch a movie, right? Yeah.
And just once more, there's so many more things, there's so many more topics that I would like to discuss. But before we end this, how can people access your book, man?
Sure. The book is called Delivered Indifference, an indictment on California's prison system by John Henry Watson. It is accessible on Amazon, and hopefully we can get a ebook going. If anybody out there hears this and they would like to help me, I have had, me and the people in my inner circle have had nothing but trouble with the software to put the book in ebook form. Any help would be appreciated if anybody wants to reach out. And it's a formatting issue, and it has a lot to do with cables and the software. So if somebody wants to help me with that, I would entertain the conversation.
Three-way call alert.
Happen. So yeah, that's the book. Right now it is just a book, and until we can do something about the ebook, I guess that's the way it'll be.
Is there any last message? Anything else that you would like to say to anybody or anything?
You have 60 seconds remaining.
No, for me, it is just that wherever I can be an asset, wherever I can be of assistance, always feel free to engage me, whatever level, whether it is somebody who's had experiences, and I can't imagine that I was ever therapeutic to anyone, but it turned out I was. And also, if anybody has criminology questions, I'm a very sober person, so you're always going to get a sober answer out of me.
Hey, Jonathan, man, it was such a pleasure to get a piece of your mind once more, man. I sincerely appreciate your presence. Thank you, bro.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. Thanks to everyone listening.